Hello dear viewers across the world and welcome to the Ambassadors program coming to you from Ashorooq Television Network. This is Shakoor Nyaketo. As we travel through the cameras, we will walk you around places to see, people to know and stories to learn from. Today, we brought you a story from Rwanda as we are welcoming the head of the mission here in Sudan, Mr. Abel Buhungu. Very welcome to Ashorooq Network TV. We're very happy to have you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shakoor, for having me.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Abel. Now, as we are continuing our program, we will take you through a video to know more about Rwanda. Then we will continue our discussion. Welcome back, dear viewers. I hope you liked the video, and I'm definitely sure you have enjoyed watching a lot about Rwanda. To bring you the story from the horse mouth, today with us, the head of the mission here in the embassy of Republic of Rwanda in Khartoum, Mr. Abel Buhungu. We back to you. Do we know who are we talking to this morning?
Thank you, Mr. Shakoor. Like you correctly said, I'm the head of mission of Rwanda here in the Sudan. I represent my country here. And my name's like you correctly addressed me, I'm Abel Buhungu. I've been here for almost 2 years now.
Oh, 2 years.
That's right. And Rwanda as a country, if I may, is located at the heart of Africa. It's one of the 7 members of the East African Community, a member of COMESA, just like the Republic of Sudan is.
Yes, we know that.
The capital of Rwanda is Kigali.
Okay.
We are 26,300 kilometers in size, and the country is populated by about 13 million people.
Okay, that's fantastic.
We are landlocked, but air-linked. We have a number of international airlines that fly to Kigali and to other parts of the world.
Okay.
And more specifically, Rwanda Air goes to about 30 destinations, both on the continent and in other continents.
As I've also seen that Rwanda Air flying to US.
That's right. No, it was about to start flying to New York just before COVID set in. So it was halted a little bit.
Okay.
But we'll be flying there soon, I believe. But flies to other countries, China, the UK, Belgium, India,
okay.
And on the continent I can't list. It's south, east, north, west.
That is very much.
Central.
Yeah, that's very good. Mr. Ambassador, if we would like to know much about Rwanda, from war to peace, and from destruction to building, as well as from bankruptcy to one of the fastest growing economy in Africa. We would like to learn the story of Rwanda, where Rwanda was in 1990s and today, how peace has been sustained.
Well, let me begin just briefly by a bit about our pre-colonial period.
Yeah.
Rwanda existed as a kingdom right from the 11th century, as far back as that time. And it existed as a nation state up to the time of the colonial masters for over 700 years. We, before the colonials, were a united people. We had a homogeneous culture, one of the few countries in the world that speak one language. All of us
speak only one language.
Speak only one language.
What is that language?
Kinyarwanda.
Kinyarwanda.
By the way, we are, of course, after the colonial masters, we now have adopted languages like the phones. We are Francophone, we are Anglophone, but above all, we are Kinyarwandaphone.
Yeah, Kinyarwandaphone.
We all speak that language. That's a uniting factor, a big one. We had very strong Rwandan values, just as you do here in the Sudan, that helped us build the unity, helped us be as patriotic as we would wish to be. And once the colonial masters came and realized we were a nation state, even at the time they arrived, we had a standing army to defend the sovereignty of the nation. We had all the government structures you can think of today that we also have and you have. They realized it wasn't easy to rule and conquer over us.
Okay.
And they initiated the divide and rule policy. And the first thing they did was to disparage the Rwandan values, Rwandan culture, and even went to the extent of banishing the Itorero, which was our traditional school that inculcated and nurtured the Rwandan values that include patriotism, discipline, hard work, you can name it.
Good.
After all that was done, we also note, you know, today you've heard, I'm sure, of what we call the ethnic groups in Rwanda.
Yeah, the only people know that Rwanda has two ethnic groups who were fighting.
Actually, in theory, after the colonialists invented them, they became three.
They become three.
They invented the ethnic groups, and there are three. It's only because the two are the most talked about.
Yes.
So essentially, the Hutu, Tutsi, and Twa were social classes back in history.
So the Twa was created after the colonialists?
No. The ethnic groups, all the three ethnic groups were created because before the colonialists, these were social classes. They were not ethnic groups. You can't talk of an ethnic group when you have a homogeneous culture, you all have one language, and you all stay across the same hills and mountains, valleys. There are no particular areas of Rwanda that are inhabited by one ethnic group or the other. We all stay across the hills and mountains. But they then, to execute or implement their divide and rule policy, which was meant to conquer us as a people, they carried out a social research back in 1930, a very demeaning social research. We have video evidence of the colonial masters measuring the length of the nose, the width of the forehead, the height of our people back in 1930. And on that basis determined that the average length of a nose for a Tutsi is that much, the one for Hutu is this much, the one for Twa is this much, and issued national IDs identifying us as Tutsi ethnic group, Hutu ethnic group, or Twa ethnic group.
Within the ID card?
National identity cards issued by the colonials back in 1932.
Okay, that's good.
And as we'll talk about it later, these national IDs that identified us as such were used later during the cyclic killings that started back in 1959 and climaxed into the 1994 genocide against Tutsi. The same IDs were used to identify the Tutsis from other Rwandese for the killing.
So to be killed? To be
killed, because there was no other way except for those who lived with neighbors and knew which ID they had. Otherwise, there was no other way you would identify these people correctly.
That was very tragic. But not stopping you, what has inspired and motivated the Rwandese to get across this very particular moment?
Thank you, Mr. Shakoor. Maybe just to, after dividing us and issuing these national IDs, just to fast track it a little bit, by the 1950s, the Hutu children who had been taken through the education system that was also established by the colonial masters, Catholic schools more specifically, were now supported to create some political parties. One of them that I'll mention is the one called Party for the Hutus. The name says it all. You can imagine a political party that's supposed to be a national political party.
It's named on a tribe, on a particular ethnic group.
On a particular ethnic group. Then they supported them as well to draft what they called the Hutu Manifesto back in 1957. Again, You understand what it means? 1959, they helped them draft and established or passed what they called the 10 Hutu Commandments. You know, Christians are more knowledgeable about the 10 Commandments of God. But in the context of Rwanda, you had the 10 Commandments of Hutus. These are official documents that are on record. Now, from 1959, after the killing, mysterious death of the last effective king of Rwanda, King Rudahigwa, who was summoned in a meeting in Bujumbura, which at the time was the regional capital of Burundi, Rwanda. The colonial regional capital was in Bujumbura.
For the boss.
They summoned him for a meeting in Bujumbura, and that was his end. We had people that were there were told he died. It was a mysterious death, and that was the beginning of what later became the first signs of what later became the genocide. First pogroms that targeted Tutsis began in 1959, and resultant, therefore, massive movement of refugees out of Rwanda into neighboring countries. Massive movement of Tutsi refugees into neighboring countries. Now, 1952, we were given independence, handed over to the other Hutu children that I talked about that we had been taken through the education system established by the colonial masters, and grooming them or indoctrinating them to carry on with the policies that were instituted by the colonial masters.
So the chicks has been sequenced.
That's right. So 1962 independence is passed on to the first president, Kayibanda Gergol, and the party he led was the Party for the Hutus, Parime Hutu, so it was called in French. That was the first effective president after independence. More cyclical killings of Tutsis, and by 1990 we had over 1 million refugees scattered in the region, stateless for over 30 years.
Good.
Now these children are the ones that started the liberation struggle to try and end the statelessness that Rwandese had suffered for over 30 years. And even those inside the country had been impoverished, not exposed at all to the outer world. Getting a passport at the time was a big celebration.
It was
very restricted.
Good.
And only preserved for even education, preserved for the inner circle of those that were in government.
Very good. As we continue, before we stop here, Mr. Abel, we are going to have a small break, and then we will come back. Dear viewers, as we continue and dive into the history of Rwanda, we will get back to you. Welcome back again, dear viewers, to our TV show, The Ambassador. We'll continue our story today about Rwanda. Mr. Ambassador, as we dive into the history of Rwanda, we would like to talk a bit about the economy, because today Rwanda has the fastest economy, and there are some facts that when we look at it 1 or 2 years back, it was about $32 billion. This is the GDP, but today it moved up to 40. That's exactly about 43% of difference from the World Bank economy report and the formal report that come from the Rwanda. So how Rwanda could be able to drive that fastest economy?
Thank you, Mr. Shakoor. Just maybe before I go to the economy, where we ended, we were about to liberate Rwanda.
Okay.
So the liberation struggle began on the 1st of October 1990. And this was aimed at Actually, one of the things was the country was impoverished, no exposure, and over 1 million of our people were stateless. We needed to work on a number of things, both political, economic, as well as diplomacy. So within 4 years, the country was liberated. But unfortunately, the same people that had killed, and of course, with resultant refugees over the 30 years or so, planned to now cleanse Rwanda of all the Tutsis and anybody who opposed the ideology of genocide. Genocide began on the 7th of April, 1994, and was ended by the 4th of July, 1994. Within 100 days, over 1 million Tutsis had been massacred.
Over 1 million?
Over 1 million Tutsis had been massacred. Using roadblocks that were mounted across the country, using militias that were recruited as far back as 1992, called Interahamwe, trained and armed with traditional weapons, pangas or machetes imported from outside the country I don't want to mention here. Over 5 million pangas imported for that purpose. Radios, TVs, messages, official
they were all promoting
speeches by government promoting
hate and
killings, national IDs that I talked about that identified people as Tutsi, Hutu, and Twa, used to target the Tutsis. That's how fast. That is the fastest genocide in the history.
Okay. How does it end?
It ended only thanks to the Rwandan Patriotic Front, the very one that I talked about that started the liberation struggle in 1990,
okay.
1st October. Because the UN force that was deployed back in Rwanda in August of 1993,
okay.
after the government, then the genocidal government, had negotiated with the Rwandan Patriotic Front and agreed to share power in order to execute the political program of the RPF. So it was interested, certainly, the very reason why it had started the liberation struggle. The UN force, once the genocide began, they withdrew close to 85% of the force and left Rwandese at their own peril. So the RPF, which was in a peacetime at the time because they had signed the peace agreement, resolved to start the military campaign against the genocide, and within the 100 days or slightly less than that, against all odds, the RPF managed to stop the genocide. Now, after stopping the genocide, certainly the challenges were enormous, but with the RPF determined to unite Rwandese, rebuild the unity, restate the Rwandan values I talked about.
How do you restate the Rwandan values? Because already people have the values and then we restate the values.
Well, they had been, one of the institutions that was meant to, back in history, like I said, was meant to nurture and inculcate these Rwandan values within the young men and girls that were born,
okay.
had been banished by the colonial masters. Rwandan values culture treated as satanic, and of course fought by the colonial masters because they believed, they saw, and it was true, these are the ones that brought us together as a people. So without them, they knew they would achieve the objective of conquering us, and
okay.
they did. Now, the RPF, once in government, instituted a government of national unity. Even soldiers and the police at the time, gendarmerie, who unfortunately, as a force, were used by the genocidal government to execute the genocide, were integrated, of course, on the merit of those that as individuals did not participate in the genocide. They were integrated. Political leaders integrated into government.
Okay.
But of course, those that did not participate directly in the genocide. Military, police, other security services integrated. And then back to the issue of the economy. Rwanda is not endowed with a lot of natural resources like some other countries on the continent. But we believe the human resource is the most important resource that we have as a people and as a country. 1994, we had the big challenge of the human resource.
Okay.
The few small number that was educated had either been killed or had participated in the killings and therefore had run out of the country. 1994, once overpowered, the genocidal government ran into eastern DRC and they took with them as hostage over 3 million of our people, hostage. And the logic in that was, let's take all of them and see how the RPF will rule over a country or govern a country without a people, how they will succeed.
Oh.
But they also wanted to have them as, a source of recruitment for continuous replenishment of their forces, genocidal force, which they plan to come back, take over government and continue with their mission of genocide ideology or genocidal execution. Now, one of the priorities that the new government embarked on was education. I remember in 1999, back in 1999, just barely 5 years after the genocide, we had over 500 students sponsored by government in Indian universities. I actually had the opportunity to visit that time with our Minister of Education. We had over 200 students studying in different universities in South Africa. We had other smaller numbers of students studying in the US and European countries on government sponsorship. All these are on government sponsorship. And the purpose for this was to build a nucleus, critical mass that was needed to help us build the economy, work on the governance, and all other areas that we need. IT infrastructure or services.
Very good.
Now, once graduated, this was one of the major areas that helped us start working on the economy.
Good.
In the year 2000, we promulgated our Vision 2020.
And the Vision 2020, has it been achieved properly?
By over 80%.
Okay.
That's right. Which ended in the year 2020. We now have Vision 2050. 2050. The Vision 2050, by 2035, it's envisaged we shall be a lower middle income country. By 2050, we shall be a high income country.
Okay, that's good.
We're working hard on that. Yes, working hard on that and looking at how we performed with our Vision 2050, rather 2020, we believe we shall achieve the stated objectives.
We wish so that one. As one of the very important economic factors, I believe, in Rwanda also is the tourism. And the culture of Rwanda and the geography of Rwanda. And by Rwanda having named as a land of the southern hills, that may have contributed. And we see that Rwanda now offers free visa to every citizen from everywhere. Now, how could Rwanda build that tourism infrastructure?
Well, like I said, Mr. Shakoor, you know, by Vision 2020, our vision drives us to be a knowledge-based economy. And one of the things we had to do at the onset was to make sure we build a very reliable ICT infrastructure. We laid the fiber optic across the country, and tourism was identified as one of the major drivers of our economy.
In Rwanda?
In Rwanda. Like I said, given our location very close to the equator, the country has 2 rain seasons throughout the year. Almost half the year, it's raining.
Oh, okay.
It's green throughout the year. The weather is very friendly. As a country, we are practicing low volume, high yield tourism structure. Tourism strategy, sorry. Low volume, high yield tourism strategy. Today, we have about 10 5-star hotels and boutiques across our country, as small as we are, where we didn't have one in 1994, not even a reliable one of a 5-star. And we have a wide range of other lower stars, from 4 stars downwards. One of the critical needs for you to get or to execute the low volume, high-end tourism strategy is to have reliable services, is to have very good infrastructure, hotels, road networks. We have road networks throughout the country. One of the best on the continent is to have security. Our security is very reliable. You can walk, drive throughout the night. Whether you're a lady or a gentleman, doesn't matter. Security is guaranteed.
Good. There is a question that will take us back to the economy, but looking at the culture, as we see some arts are here, that we talk about over 12 to 13 million people with the ethnicities that you have mentioned. How diversity of Rwanda uphold that peace vision and then continue together as people connect the culture with tourism and then culture with the economy?
Well, I don't know whether I got that question properly. Can you repeat it again?
I'm saying we look at the number of the population in Rwanda from 12 to 13 million people. Definitely these people include the ethnicities that you have spoken about. How would the diversity of Rwandese help and support the economy and the culture?
You know, as far as culture is concerned, and talk about the ethnicity, after the liberation, the national IDs I talked about that were ethnic were abolished.
Okay.
We now have one national ID that identifies us as Rwandan, born by these parents, and that's it. So we no longer have the 3 ethnic groups.
You have only Rwandese.
We have Rwandese. But remember, I told you we have a very rich culture as a people.
Okay.
Even in the tourism that we talk about, we have, for example, you might have seen the video, I believe, what we call inyambo, the cows. You know, traditionally cows.
Yes, I'll see that one.
Meant a lot in our country, with the big horns.
Big horns.
Yes, and very elegant, if you saw.
They are.
Sometimes even with, you know. So we have museums laid up across the country that show the diversity or show a lot about our culture. We have our history. Unfortunately, a bit of the history is very terrible.
Very
the
good.
Genocide I talked about.
Good.
But it's also important for people to know. You can't know where you're going if you don't know where you're coming from.
Good, very, very wonderful. Well, we are captured by time. But before we conclude, we have a question that related to the economy. As we've spoken about the corruption, how does Rwanda Authority fight corruption, as we know that in Africa, corruption has been always the driven factor of underdevelopment. So how will the corruption has been fought?
Very important. Just to add on the tourism aspect, Rwanda is one of the biggest hosts of big conferences and meetings, if you may have noted.
Definitely.
Rated second on the continent. And because, of course, of the infrastructure we put together. And because we've identified tourism as a major driver of our economy. We are also now a sports tourist destination. I'm sure you've noted, if you've noticed, Rwanda has lately been hosting the NBA Africa League in one of the very ultra-modern indoor stadiums.
All right, that's fine.
Indoor sports stadiums built in Rwanda. Now, on the corruption aspect, you know, like I said, Rwanda is not so much endowed with lots of natural resources. We have some minerals, but not as much as certain other countries. And one of the strategies we've used to grow our economy is to make sure we have institutions and laws that prevent corruption. We have zero tolerance to corruption. 2 days ago, one of our ministers
has been
was actually served with 5 years sentence.
I have noticed that.
That's right. And so for us, when it comes to corruption, it's zero tolerance, whoever you are. Today, and now it's for a number of years, annually, we have to declare wealth.
Declare wealth? Individually.
All government officials, from some level, of course, not, but directors, if you, for example, have anywhere you meet with finances or government, going upwards, and even the president.
Even the president?
Even the president.
Himself can be held accountable for any kind of corruption?
I mean, annually, he declares his wealth.
Okay.
That's right. So all government leaders and officials
great
annually declare their wealth. And we have institutions that have been put in place to help us deliver to that vision. We have the Auditor General's Office that is dedicated to that. We have the Ombudsman's Office that is also dedicated to that. We have the Tender Board, and we have other, even when a government official, a minister is appointed, when sworn in, one of the things he has to state is exactly that. He's never going to use his position position to individually benefit
themselves. Okay, that's
using the position they're having.
Good.
That's right. So if you go against that, the long arm of the law catches up with you.
You will be in dilemma. That's very wonderful and very good, Mr. Ambassador. Now, as we are running out of time, what do you conclude with to the world and to the Sudanese, especially people who are watching you right now, that how should they view Rwanda? And what is your message to the people and to the world about Rwanda?
Well, Rwanda has had a very bad history. We learned our lessons, and from those lessons, we also picked policies that you can read today. For example, I'm sure you're aware Rwanda participates in peacekeeping missions, UN peacekeeping missions.
Definitely.
I believe until 2021, the RDF, Rwanda Defense Force contingent, was part of UNAMID. Actually, the very first country that deployed their forces in UNAMID back in 2006.
In Darfur, Sudan.
That's right. We have today forces in Mozambique,
okay,
supporting the Mozambican forces to fight terrorists that are there. We have forces that are in Central African Republic doing the same thing. That's a lesson learned, because we believe that just as we tested what absence of security meant to us, we need to support other brothers on the continent and beyond when we can, to help out, achieve that objective of getting peace. Because without peace, it's difficult to achieve development, which we all aspire to as a country, Rwanda, Sudan, and all other countries. Now, one other lesson, of course, I would say is that because we suffered from bad governance, one of the things we have tried to do as a country, as a government, is to make sure we are fair. Our government is people-centered. All our national policies are always geared towards serving the people, because we believe our government was put there by the people. The liberation struggle itself was supported fully by people, our citizens, both from within the country and among those that were refugees.
That is very good.
For over 30 years. So we work for our people. And one of the ways of working for our people is to make sure that even the taxes they pay do not go into other people's pockets.
It goes to the service of the people.
It goes to the service of the people.
As we're coming to the end, Ambassador, we would like to thank you for being with us and talking to our show. And it's an opportunity for you to, as you are head of the mission in Sudan, your impression and your word to Sudan and to the Sudanese people as you become one of the community here.
Thank you, Mr. Shakoor. You know, Rwanda and Sudan have a lot in common, both in history as well as the aspirations we have for our people, for the future. I'm first of all encouraged and commend the ongoing rapprochement between the leaders of the Sudan and the different political stakeholders to try and peacefully and sustainably resolve the ongoing conflict situation that has bedeviled the country for a while now. I appreciate and can never really attach as much value as I should to the manner in which Sudanese are very welcoming, very compassionate, and very friendly people. I've loved the food and drinks here.
The foods, what food?
And I'll give some examples. I love the fish in Sudan.
Fish in Sudan. Okay.
I love some of the drinks, you know, hibiscus.
Yeah, the karkade.
Karkade,
oh,
that's
yeah,
right.
That's
love
fantastic.
It. I love the fruits. You have very beautiful fruits. And I must say, you know, the other very attachment I have that I always believe we should be emulating is the very close family ties the people in Sudan have. Okay. Very strong family values. I always never get used to what I see, including buildings, how people build and families are together. You drive around or walk around, you see people sitting together, drinking tea in groups, small groups.
Yes, and the tea makers.
Very beautiful.
Well, that's good.
Very close social ties, both in families, but as well as how you welcome people from outside like myself.
Oh.
My stay here has been very fulfilling, and I look forward to more time here and with the Sudanese.
Well, by that, thank you so much, Mr. Ambassador Abel Buhungu, the head of the mission of Rwanda in Sudan. And dear viewers across the world, thank you so much for watching, and thank you for being part of the English show here. This is The Ambassador.